10:46 p.m., the hospital alarm sounded, a fire drill lasting only minutes. When the halls filled again, one visitor was found dead. Hospitals never truly sleep. Even late at night, there is movement. Soft footsteps in hallways, quiet voices behind curtains, the steady beep of machines measuring life 1 second at a time. At Briar Hollow Medical Center, the lights stay bright no matter the hour. They don't flicker. They don't dim. The building is designed to feel controlled, safe, and prepared. Hospitals rehearse emergencies. They practice evacuations. They trust procedure. But on one cold evening in late November, procedure became something else. It became cover. And in the space of a single night, 2 people would die. Because one powerful man believed his past had returned. A visitor who was never supposed to stay. Her name was Sophie Marlowe. She was not a patient, not staff, not part of the hospital system at all. Sophie was simply visiting her aunt, admitted for observation after a minor stroke. She arrived that afternoon with a small bag, a phone charger, and the tired kindness families bring into hospital rooms. She was only meant to stay a few hours. Her cousin, Tessa, was supposed to arrive later that evening to take over. They had planned it carefully. Sophie would sit with their aunt through the afternoon. Tessa would come around 7. Then Sophie would go home. A simple exchange. Normal. Routine. But hospitals do not respect routine. Unexpected delays happen all the time. A test runs late. A doctor wants to speak longer. A patient becomes anxious and doesn't want to be alone. Time stretched. Sophie texted Tessa. Still coming. No reply. At first, Sophie assumed her cousin was running behind. Traffic. A forgotten errand. Something ordinary. So Sophie stayed. She didn't want to leave her aunt alone. By the time the clock passed 8, the hallway outside room 614 was quieter. Night shift had settled in, and Sophie was still there. A visitor who had stayed too long. A person out of place the moment her name entered the system. When Sophie entered the hospital, she checked in at the front desk. A visitor badge was printed. Sophie Marlowe, room 614. It was routine, the kind of detail no one thinks about. But that badge was also logged into the hospital's internal system. And that is where the story truly began. Because hours before anyone noticed Sophie, someone important saw her name. The man who noticed first. On the 6th floor of Briar Hollow, one name carried weight. Dr. Adrian Kessler, a respected neurosurgeon. Award-winning, celebrated. The kind of doctor whose schedule was treated like law. His photo appeared on hospital brochures. His name was spoken with pride by administrators. Patients requested him. To the public, he was proof that Briar Hollow was one of the best hospitals in the region. But hospitals are not only places of healing. They are places of hierarchy. And powerful people inside them learn something early. Reputation is everything. And silence is often easier than truth. Years earlier, a nurse had filed an internal complaint against Dr. Kessler. Serious misconduct, boundary violations, something that should have ended a career, but it never reached the public. The hospital buried it, handled it quietly, sealed it behind closed doors, because Kessler brought in money, prestige, donations. The nurse eventually disappeared from the staff roster. No announcement, no explanation, just absence. Dr. Kessler remained, promoted, protected, untouchable, and he learned a lesson. The system could protect him as long as nothing resurfaced. That evening, Dr. Kessler was reviewing floor logs on an internal screen. Patient movements, staff notes, visitor entries. Then he saw something small, a single line of text. Visitor, Sophie Marlowe, room 614. He froze. It had been years since he had seen that name. Not because Sophie was famous, but because she was connected to the past he had buried. A name that appeared once in a sealed report. A reminder that someone might still remember. To a healthy mind, it would mean nothing. To Kessler, it felt like a threat. He didn't think, "She's visiting family." He thought, "She's here because she knows." Fear makes powerful people paranoid, and paranoia makes them dangerous. Later that night, Kessler stepped out of an elevator on the 6th floor. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Then he saw Sophie, just a visitor sitting outside room 614, scrolling on her phone, tired, waiting. To anyone else, she was nothing. But to Kessler, she was the past standing quietly under fluorescent light. His mind raced. Had she come here on purpose? Was she connected to the nurse? Was she here to speak? To expose? In truth, Sophie was only a relative. But Kessler did not see truth. He saw risk. And powerful people do not always run from risk. Sometimes, they erase it. Sophie texted Tessa again. "Please come. I'm still here." No response. At 9 p.m., she tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Sophie frowned. Something felt wrong. But she stayed. Because leaving would mean abandoning her aunt. She told herself she would wait another hour. Just one more. Sophie did not know that 2 hours earlier, across town, something had already happened. In a small apartment, Tessa Marlowe had been found dead. No public announcement yet. No connection made. Just a sealed scene and unanswered questions. Which meant one thing: Tessa didn't fail to arrive. She was removed, so Sophie would stay. So Sophie would be alone. The delay wasn't bad luck. It was engineered. At 10:46 p.m., the fire alarm sounded. Not a chaotic scream, a controlled, practiced signal. Staff looked up with mild annoyance. A drill. Hospitals did them all the time. Procedure began immediately. Nurses guided visitors. Doctors moved calmly. Patients were checked. Corridors filled with motion. And motion is perfect camouflage. Because during an evacuation, strangers do not stand out. Everyone belongs. Everyone has a reason. The 6th floor cleared quickly. Sophie stood, confused. A nurse told her,
"Please come this way."
Sophie hesitated.
"What about my aunt?"
"She'll be fine. Just follow procedure."
Procedure. That word again. Sophie moved with the crowd. Down the hall, toward the stairwell. And then, somewhere between noise and movement, she was separated. A wrong turn. A staff door held open. A quiet corridor suddenly empty. And in the space created by procedure, the hospital swallowed her. The fire drill lasted only minutes. The alarm echoed through stairwells, then faded. Staff returned to their stations. Visitors were guided back upstairs. Clipboards were checked. The hospital resumed its rhythm as if nothing had happened. No fire, no smoke, just practice. Procedure completed. But Sophie Marlowe did not return to room 614. Sophie's aunt asked quietly, "Where did she go?" A nurse glanced at the doorway. She was just here. They assumed Sophie had gone home. Visitors come and go. Hospitals are full of temporary people. A missing visitor is not unusual. Not at first. The night shift continued. Charts were updated. Monitors beeped steadily. And the hospital kept moving. It took hours before anyone understood that Sophie hadn't simply left. She had vanished inside a building designed to track everything. Dr. Adrian Kessler did not act alone. Not because he needed help, but because powerful people rarely work without leverage. His colleague was Dr. Marcus Vale, a surgeon with a clean record, a quiet reputation, and a career built on staying out of trouble. Vale had known Kessler for years. They trained in the same residency program. They rose through the same system. And years earlier, when the internal complaint was filed, Vale had been present, not as the subject, but as someone who helped contain it. He signed paperwork, attended closed meetings, kept his head down. He told himself it was none of his business, that the hospital would handle it. That silence was professionalism. But silence has consequences, and Kessler never forgot who was involved. He kept the past like a file in a drawer, not to remember, but to use. So when Kessler called Vale that night, his voice was calm, controlled. He didn't sound panicked. He sounded certain. "I need you tonight," he said. Vale hesitated. "What is this about?" Kessler paused, then spoke softly. "It's about survival." Vale understood immediately. This wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum, because Kessler didn't threaten violence. He threatened exposure. If the buried complaint resurfaced, Vale would be pulled into it too. He would lose everything. So Vale didn't help out of loyalty. He helped because he was trapped. A second set of hands created by blackmail, not friendship. Hospitals are filled with people in uniforms, scrubs, badges, clipboards. In that environment, the most dangerous person is often the one who looks like they belong. During a fire drill, that effect becomes stronger. Hallways are crowded. Doors are opened. Staff are distracted. Everyone assumes that anyone walking with purpose is supposed to be there. That is the blind spot Kessler understood. He didn't need darkness. He needed procedure. And he didn't need chaos. He needed order. Because order creates trust. And trust creates invisibility. Sophie was found early the next morning. Not in a dramatic scene. Not with noise or violence. But in stillness. In an unused consultation room off a side corridor. A room rarely entered. A room that felt forgotten. The air inside was cold. The lights above remained perfectly bright. A nurse who opened the door later said it felt like stepping into a place the hospital itself had tried to ignore. Police were called. Questions began immediately. Who was Sophie? Why was she alone? Why during a drill? And why had no one seen her after evacuation? At first, it seemed like a tragic, isolated event, until investigators discovered the second death. The cousin who never arrived. 2 hours before the fire alarm ever sounded, Tessa Marlowe had already been found dead in her apartment. The cousin who was supposed to replace Sophie. The person who would have ensured Sophie didn't stay late. At first, police treated it as unrelated, a separate tragedy. But detectives don't ignore timing. And the timing here was impossible to dismiss. Because if Tessa died first, then Sophie staying late was not coincidence. It was design. Someone removed the replacement. Someone engineered isolation. Sophie didn't stay because of bad luck. She stayed because the path was cleared for her to stay. That realization changed the case. This was not an accident inside a hospital. It was a planned sequence. The fire drill that was never filed. Investigators requested the fire drill paperwork. Hospitals document everything. Scheduled drills require notice, signatures, approvals. But Briar Hollow had none. No calendar entry, no memo, no official record. The drill had been triggered manually. Only a small number of people had access to that system. And one of them was Dr. Adrian Kessler. Detectives reviewed visitor records. Sophie's badge had been printed at 4:12 p.m. Logged. Entered. Normal. Then they checked who had accessed the 6th floor visitor list that evening. Most staff never do. But one name appeared. Dr. Adrian Kessler. He had viewed the visitor log hours before the drill. Hours before Sophie disappeared. He didn't first notice her in the hallway. He noticed her in the system. That was the moment fear began. The moment he saw the past return as a name on a screen. The investigation dug deeper. And buried things do not stay buried forever. In hospital archives, detectives found a sealed internal file. An old misconduct complaint, filed by a nurse years earlier. Serious boundary violations. A report that should have triggered consequences. Instead, it had been contained, sealed, protected, because Kessler was valuable. The hospital had chosen reputation over truth. And now, the cost of that choice was sitting in an unused consultation room. The past had not disappeared. It had only waited. This was not rage. It was preservation. Kessler did not kill because he lost control in anger. He killed because he believed control was slipping away. Powerful people do not always fear punishment. They fear exposure. They fear being seen clearly. And when someone believes their entire life depends on silence, they will do almost anything to keep it. To Kessler, Sophie's presence was not random. It was a reckoning, so he turned the hospital's greatest strength into a weapon: procedure. Dr. Marcus Vail broke first. Under pressure, he admitted what investigators already suspected. He hadn't wanted this. He wasn't proud. He wasn't devoted. He was cornered. Kessler had reminded him of the past, of the paperwork, of the sealed meetings, of the quiet decisions that had buried the nurse's complaint. Vail didn't act from cruelty. He acted from fear, and fear spreads easily inside powerful systems. He wasn't an accomplice by nature. He was an accomplice by coercion. A man turned into an instrument, not through loyalty, but through leverage. Kessler was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of release. Vail avoided a full life term only by cooperating, but still received decades behind bars. Briar Hollow Medical Center still stands. The lights still don't flicker. Patients still arrive seeking healing. Doctors still walk corridors with badges and authority. But the case left a stain no renovation could remove, because the true horror wasn't only the deaths. It was what made them possible. A hospital that buried complaints. A man protected by prestige. A colleague forced into compliance. A visitor who stayed too long and became a problem to erase. The fire drill lasted minutes. The delay lasted hours. The silence lasted years. And the most unsettling truth is simple. Sometimes the safest places in the world are only safe until procedure becomes cover. Because monsters do not always hide in shadows. Sometimes they stand in the brightest light, wearing a badge, and trusting the system to look away. Good night.